Manchester City beat Crystal Palace 4-2 to temporarily take them level on points with Liverpool, who face Manchester United tomorrow in what is going to be a crunch fixture at the top of the table for Liverpool, who are going to be trying to make sure that they keep at least as much of a distance to Manchester City as they have been doing in the last couple of weeks. Arsenal also won later on today, but Manchester City knew that they needed to take care of their own business because while being in third is not the most ideal thing for them, it is something that we have been accustomed to when Manchester City are hunting down their rivals and taking them down. So this is not a position that's going to be too hard for Manchester City to recover from, because we know exactly what they're able to do to their opponents when they have the eye of the tiger. Now, Crystal Palace offered little resistance, especially in the second half of a game that Manchester City thoroughly dominated and deserved to win, but we did still see some of the frailties that Manchester City have had in the last couple of months, which is conceding a couple of needless goals, putting themselves in a situation where there is much more pressure than they deserve to be. Hey guys, it's your boy Izzy, and if you're new to the channel, please consider hitting that like and the subscribe button to let YouTube and everybody else know that you're enjoying this content. Now, Crystal Palace started this game like a house on fire. They actually went ahead after the first 3 minutes when Mateta was able to race clear and put the ball past the substitute goalkeeper Ortega. However, Crystal Palace's thin resistance was soon exposed when Kevin De Bruyne lashed a rasping shot into the top left-hand corner. There was absolutely no way that that ball was going to be stopped. Manchester City were controlling the game with consummate ease. They were popping the ball around left, right, and center, and Crystal Palace looked like a team that was just hoping and waiting for the 90th minute to come at that point. They didn't really have that much in the way of chances after that because Manchester City just kept on compressing. And there seemed to be a host of opportunities to Manchester City, who were without Phil Foden, who was rested in this game. Kevin De Bruyne was given his usual charge to try and make sure that the opposition team is going to be split apart. And then you had Julian Alvarez, who had come in for the aforementioned Foden to try and add a little bit more attacking instinct. Now, Erling Haaland also made an appearance back into this game after having his midweek break. There were some comments that were made by Roy Keane, some that I did not agree with, that made a lot of headlines as far as him being a prolific striker, very good up front, but being a League Two type player when it comes to his attack. And I will tackle that when we get to his goal that inevitably was going to come in this game. Eventually, Manchester City kept on getting stronger and stronger as the half progressed, and you would have been mistaken for thinking that this game was just a bout where somebody was standing with his arms tied to his back and some other boxer was just whipping them senseless. Crystal Palace is a bogey team for Manchester City, and every once in a while they've sprung a surprise on Pep Guardiola. And early on in the season, they managed to score 2 late goals to tie the game at the Etihad, a result that not a lot of people saw coming at that point. Now, at 1-1 at halftime, you could have been thinking that Manchester City, who had played very well but had gotten little result based off of what they had been able to do to Crystal Palace, might be able to drop some points. And Arsenal fans such as myself and Liverpool fans were applauding Crystal Palace and hoping that they continue in the same vein when the second half started. That did not happen. Immediately after the second half had began, no sooner had the referee blown the whistle than Manchester City managed to go ahead. This time, their youngster, Rico Lewis, was able to lash in a shot from close range and beat the Crystal Palace goalkeeper. At that point, the writing was on the wall. It was easy to see that from that point, Crystal Palace were not going to offer any resistance to Manchester City's immaculate passing and dribbling in the middle of the half. They didn't even need to call on Phil Foden for the rest of the match because they just had it exactly where they wanted it to be. And for the next 20 or so odd minutes, Crystal Palace just looked as though they were hoping that Manchester City would try and sit back and that they might be able to spring a couple of counterattacks on them and hopefully try and get something out of this game. But that was immediately put to bed after 65 minutes when Erling Haaland was able to score his customary goal from close range. Now, he hadn't scored a goal in about 5 games, I believe, and that is something that we're not used to when we are talking about the most prolific striker in English football at the moment. But Erling Haaland had been criticized by Roy Keane in the middle of the week as far as the way his link-up play is for Manchester City, and some of the things that Roy Keane says has shock value because of the way he says them, and being a player of his ilk, being a very successful player for Manchester United in the past. But Roy Keane has a way of putting his points across that seem very blunt and out of the way, and I do agree with the fact that he says that Erling Haaland's link-up play could be better, of course. But there are certain things that we need to think about when we think about how Erling Haaland works for Manchester City. Number one, he plays as a lone striker. His ability to hold up the ball is not what makes Manchester City very good, because when he plays in that lone position as a striker, most of the times he is getting knockdowns on him or he's running into balls. And he is very good at turning those opportunities into straight one-on-one opportunities with goalkeepers. If you think about some of the goals he's had, like the very first goal he had against West Ham when he joined the league, it was a pass right from the back, and he doesn't need to stop the ball so he can build up play or bring in the wingers with him. Now, in tight situations such as the game against Arsenal, of course, it would be very good for him to be able to try and bring in the wingers around him, but he is usually so used to getting fed by these players and turning that opportunity into a straight one-on-one with a goalkeeper. So when I think about the fact that he was talking about his link-up play and stuff like that, Roy Keane played with some players such as Ruud van Nistelrooy, who was also not that good of a link-up player. They're usually one of these one-touch strikers who might lay off the ball to a attacking midfielder or to a winger and then run into position to be able to receive the ball, maybe play a 1-2 or something of the sort. When you're trying to look at it from a tactical point of view, Erling Haaland does exactly what he's supposed to do for Pep Guardiola, or else he would not start. Pep Guardiola usually exiles players when he feels as though they don't suit his style of play. He did that to Samuel Eto'o, he did that to Ibrahimovic, and he's done it to a few other players during his career. So he obviously is using Erling Haaland the way he wants Erling Haaland to be used, and he doesn't really expect much more from him when it comes to link-up play. We also have to take into consideration that Erling Haaland is still relatively young and is going to probably build this type of ability to play. Now, he is very raw in the way he plays, and when other people join the league, such as Darwin Núñez, you can see the rawness in the way they approach the games. Now, this is only Erling Haaland's second season in the Premier League, and I hope that he will get better when it comes to his link-up play, because some of that criticism was valid, but Erling Haaland is still young enough to be able to develop that point of play for him. Now, he's not one of those people who's going to hold up the ball and is going to try and bring in the wingers. He is a one-style, one-direct striker. Now, beyond that, the rest of the game was a complete formality, other than the fact that Kevin De Bruyne decided to whip in another beautiful goal after 70 minutes. The game was already sealed and delivered after the 65th minute goal by Erling Haaland. Now, one thing that I have criticized Manchester City for over the last couple of weeks, and maybe a little bit before that, was Manchester City's inability to keep clean sheets. Now, they have conceded a fair amount of goals, and when you compared them to Arsenal, who are barely conceding anything right now, it is something that might hamper them eventually if this does become one of those goal difference type of seasons. And it seems as though this is where it's trending to. Now, against Crystal Palace, they conceded a goal again towards the 90th minute when Odsonne-Édouard was able to turn in the ball. And at that point, you would expect Manchester City to close up shop a lot more. Now, a 4-2 win, of course, is good for Manchester City, and they probably don't care too much about conceding those two goals. But I do think in a league right now that is so tight, and when teams are separated by 2 points or 1 point, and in some cases, as it is right now with Arsenal and Liverpool, separated by goal difference, it is going to count. So Manchester City need to find some kind of resolution about their back line right now, because there seems to be a lot more moving parts than when you compare them to Arsenal. Now, with Liverpool, we know that they have a ton of injuries, and they're going to work with whatever they have to do right now. Manchester City also have injuries because Kyle Walker is out, and Akanji is only barely getting back, and Ake is also suffering from an injury. But this is probably what's going to limit them when it comes to their ability to challenge Arsenal and Liverpool to retain their title. And I think so, just simply because when you have a settled back line, it makes things a lot more easy when you move forward. They will be able to put 4 past certain teams, but those 2 that they concede are going to come back and bite them when it comes to them defending against teams with much better quality in terms of defense. Now, we saw that against Arsenal last week. If Martinelli would have gotten that pass from Trossard, that game would not have ended up very well for Manchester City, despite them playing relatively well all the way through. And that is where Manchester City's limit is at the moment, in my opinion, is that they are conceding a lot more goals than they normally do. And this is something I've been saying for a while. I do think that if they don't contain a much better side than Crystal Palace eventually, they won't be able to score those 4 goals. And in this run-in that they have, they still have another bogey team such as Tottenham, where they might have to be able to shut up shop, because when they do go to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, we know that in league play, they haven't been able to score a single goal over there. Now, they managed to beat them in the FA Cup, but that does not guarantee that they will be able to beat them in the league right now. And Tottenham are going for that top 4 position, and at home against Manchester City, who they know they have a very good record at home against. These 2 goals that Manchester City concede against Crystal Palace will turn into a loss if they concede the equivalent against Tottenham Hotspur. But anyway, guys, let me know what you think. It's your boy Izzy, back at it again with another video. Please leave your comments down below. This title run-in is going to be very interesting, and with all 3 sides looking as though they might not be ready to drop any points, whoever blinks first might be the one who cries tears at the end of the day. But anyway, guys, it's your boy Izzy, and up until the next time and the next review, peace.